listen, man, being an artist is super awesome. But I think being a artist's dad, there's a lot of heartache there, because being an artist is heartache, man.
Dude, I'm so excited to speak with you, man. It's been a while. So I'm Adam, and this is about you and your journey in music. And obviously we'll talk about the new album as well, if that's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So
I like all of that. I like talking. So I like the sound of my own voice. I was told that's why I rap. One of my colleagues said, as he's passing the joint, the reason we talk too much is because we love the sound of our own voice, and we're just working out the lines before we have to say them in front of people. And it sounded way more cool when he said it. So when I say it, it's like, it sounds kind of trite. Anyway.
No, it's funny. I always used to say that too when I first started radio. I'm like, yeah, I like the sound of my own voice, and I like talking to myself in a booth.
Yeah, but you got a pretty good voice. Like, you got a good radio voice. It makes sense to me that you're doing that. Like, I could see you doing radio, or maybe, I don't know, being a pediatrician. You got a good voice, so you could.
Pediatrician.
Yeah, man. Like, you'd be a good doctor for kids. Like, look, Billy, you gotta take this shot, or otherwise you end up with the mumps, and you don't want the mumps. Like. The mumps.
I have 2 kids of my own. I wish my voice worked that well on them when when they don't listen to me. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. Yeah.
So, were you born and raised in Minneapolis then?
I was.
Okay.
Yeah. I kind of was in the same 2 square miles pretty much the majority of my life. There was a time when I snuck over to a different part of town, just because I thought that was the pragmatic thing to do from a financial standpoint or what have you. But then I always ended up back in South Central Minneapolis. We used to just say South Minneapolis. And then one time I saw it in print, somebody said South Central Minneapolis. And because of my relationship to hip hop and how hardcore and tough the words South Central make anything sound.
Sure.
I now once in a while I say South Central Minneapolis, but we don't really talk like that here. So I'm trying to figure out why would I say that to you? I don't know, because it's really hardcore and tough.
I like it.
But yeah, South Minneapolis. My father, born and raised there as well. In fact, his childhood home was 4 blocks away from my childhood home.
No way. That's awesome. Were your grandparents there, or his parents still there?
No, his parents are not around anymore.
Oh, okay.
And he's passed away as well. Yeah, no, there's he
like
has
as a
sister,
kid,
a sibling, and so I still have an auntie that's here. And then a lot of cousins.
Sure. But as a kid,
more
just
cousins than I'll actually admit to. Yeah. But as a kid, I didn't fully understand the greatness of all that. It's not till you're adult that you can actually like really process and be grateful for something like that. As a kid, you feel like, oh man, I want to be in New York. I feel boxed in. I want to move to LA. I want to be in Chicago. You know what I'm saying? All these things, because you're like, my town is too little. As an adult, you're like, oh man, like rent here is mad cheap because it's super cold, and you gotta pay people to live here. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, as an adult, you know how to appreciate something like that. It's interesting because one of my children is super Minneapolis proud. And I find that interesting because at his age, I wasn't like Minneapolis proud. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't not proud, but I had dreams of, going to like Paris and London and who knows where. You know what I'm saying? Whereas, yeah.
As far as that goes, like, were you born and raised into like a musical household at all? Or like, how did you end up wanting to pursue this?
I mean, I was a kid of the 70s, and so my household was probably about as musical as most households were in my city. Whereas that means like your parents have got the musical taste that's shaped by the 70s radio. Vinyl was a big deal. And so there's records in the house. My dad, he messed around with an instrument, but I don't actually have a whole lot of memory of that. I've just through folklore, I know this, you know what I'm saying? It's like by the time I was making music, I never saw him play any instruments, you know. But
Okay.
it was a musical family in that they loved music. Music
Okay.
was a very integral part of the household when I was a kid. It was always on. It was always on either in the house or in the car. And I think that, you know, the thing about hip hop as a kid, you didn't, it actually, knowing how to play the piano didn't, didn't, I didn't care if you knew how to play the piano. I was into
Hmm.
rap music. I didn't care if you could play guitar. So knowing how to play music really didn't do anything for me. It wasn't something that I was like, oh man, I want to learn how to. Nah, we made music without instruments, and that was kind of the point in a way, um, because you find the thing that you're probably most insecure about, and lean into it and make it the thing that you are most proud of. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like making something out of nothing was a big part of how me and my friends found ourselves interested in making this music or being a part of this culture, because it wasn't even just being a rapper or a DJ. We wanted to break dance, we wanted to write graffiti, you know, we
Hmm.
wanted to be fly, we wanted to be, because it wasn't like it just was the culture that we were attracted to as 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds.
Hmm. And so, like,
So
with that, were you writing? Like, I mean, how quickly were you? I mean, and what was kind of like the early hip hop you were listening to?
I mean, back then it's the same hip hop everybody listened to because it was the only hip hop that was available. There wasn't like, it wasn't this tree of life that it is today with all these
Uh-huh.
different types of branches. You know, it was like you had 80s hip hop, which you
Hmm.
got to see evolution in it, you know, because early 80s hip hop was very electro and disco. And
Hmm.
then as it started to, you know, as technology started to create different drum machines and different, you know, samplers where you could actually take snippets of records and whatnot, it started to transform the landscape. But the rappers were all still from kind of a school of, um, there was information they were giving us. There were jokes and stories they were telling us. There was homage to reggae. There was
Hmm.
homage to eventually to jazz. And then everything was about James Brown drums, you know? And so that is my introduction to it. Run DMC really was what made me want to rap, but not because I could rap good, just because I wanted attention. So I was willing to take it and whatever. I would be Jam Master Jay. I would be DMC. I would be Run. I would be the guy that designed the Adidas sneakers on their feet. I didn't care. I just wanted to be a part of it. But it was Run DMC that made me want to be a part of it. They're the ones that made me realize this was not my father's music. This was my music. You know, prior to
Yeah.
them, when rap still had disco in it, you had, you know, Sugar Hill Records or Curtis Blow. My dad was into that stuff. My dad had those records. My dad played that stuff in the car. But when Run DMC happened, I could see how he was flinching because they were yelling at him. And
Right.
that's when I was like, oh, that's for me. Like anybody that makes my dad flinch, that's for me. No different than how some kids probably fell into punk rock,
Yeah.
but their dads were into Aerosmith or something. You know what I'm saying? It's
Sure.
like, you know, dad, your Aerosmith ass dad ain't trying to listen to, you know, Bad Brains. So I'm
Right.
listening to Bad Brains. You know what I'm saying? So like Run DMC was my Bad Brains in that way.
I love that. It's interesting that you say that because I have a 15-year-old and a 7-year-old, and the 15-year-old's playing me stuff like music that he listens to it, and I kind of did the cringe, and I try to be like hip to new stuff, and it's like, oh, like I'm such like the parent dad right now, just oh, this isn't music type deal, you know what
Be
I
careful, man. Be careful because you might, you know, you might make an artist out of them.
mean? Right. No, that'd be a great thing.
Yeah, you say that. Listen, man, being an artist is super awesome. But I think being a artist's dad, there's a lot of heartache there because being an artist is heartache, man. Like,
Mhm.
you know,
Oh yeah.
some people get lucky and fortunate and they find ways to like get that validation they're looking for through their art. And I consider myself to be one of those fortunate, lucky jerk offs. You know what I'm saying? But it's like for many of us, including those of us that are fortunate, it's a lot of heartbreak, man. And
Mhm.
you know, it's like, yes, I would love to see my kids make art, but man, I don't want to see my kids have broken hearts and suffer through some of the I guess the anxieties, the depressions, the different things that come along with being creative. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So it's like it's a two-way street, man. Like
Yeah,
you
there's
know,
no blueprint for it. It's not like you're gonna finish this and then, like, if you're a doctor or,
yeah,
pediatrician, like you brought up earlier, or something like
yeah,
that.
where it's like, oh, you're probably likely gonna get a job. It's like the
Right.
truth is with this, uh, the odds of you getting a job are mad slim. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
I like the fact that I've accumulated and paid a lot of attention so that even if I get fired from my position, I can likely still get some sort of career working in the field of art,
Uh-huh.
even if I'm not the actual creator of that art. You know what I'm saying? It's like I've paid enough attention and I love art enough that I would probably still force myself to be a square peg in a round hole somewhere in this landscape.
Sure, sure. And when you started, when Atmosphere started, you were actually what, the DJ, right? And did you start off as a DJ?
Technically, yeah, I started off as a DJ. I mean, first, as an 11-year-old, I was a break dancer.
Okay.
All of us were. We'd pull out the cardboard and go to whoever's front yard we were gonna murder their grass this year. And lay all the cardboard out, and somebody would pull out a boombox, and we would break dance all day long, break dance and play football. And then I got into graffiti.
Okay.
I realized I wasn't good enough I was scared to try a lot of the acrobatic stuff. I never learned how to spin on my head. A friend of mine could spin on his head. And because of that, he ended up getting really thick neck muscles. And when he would rap on stage, his muscles would flex and it was really kind of alien looking. I loved it. I missed that. But I just didn't progress as a breakdancer. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna do graffiti. And then as I got older with the graffiti thing, I was like, man, I just can't deal with the idea of having to call my mom to come bail me out of jail as a young father. You know what I'm saying? What am I doing? You know what I mean? No disrespect, but I just wasn't built for that. I was scared. I was scared of the embarrassment that might come with that. I was scared of the financial hit that might come from getting busted, point blank. I grew up scared of cops. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like
Mhm.
I collected records. I knew how to scratch, and so when I really, really tried to buckle down and get serious, I was a DJ, and I wanted to be a DJ because you guys are the coolest. You guys that play records and talk on the radio, specifically in the late '80s, early '90s. For me, they were the coolest people in the city. You know what I'm saying? It's like they were. I don't want to say gatekeepers because that's a bad word, but they
But
were the
kind of
ones that,
back then, right? I mean, what would
yeah,
get
but
on the
they're the
air?
Yeah, but I didn't know they were gatekeepers. I thought they were the heroes that were turning us on to new things that we didn't know about.
Mhm.
So the DJs at college radio, a part of my heart belonged to them because they were the ones showing me all these, Betty Severe. Why am I a fan of that? Well, it's because college radio was turning me on to all this weird indie rock stuff, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And then the people that worked at the record stores that you could sit and talk to for an hour and a half about what came out on this Tuesday, you know what I mean? Like, so these were the cool people in my life. These were the people I looked at and was like, I want to be like these people. So that's what I chased after. I chased after being a DJ, and I chased after working record retail.
Mhm.
Um, and slowly just accidentally became a rapper. I could always rap. I rapped in junior high because it was fun. I would rap in all the talent shows that I could, but I didn't do that because I wanted to grow up and be a rapper. I did
Mhm.
that because I loved the attention that it garnered for me, for people to be like, "Oh yeah, you can rhyme." Like it wasn't like a realistic career goal,
Sure.
especially in Minneapolis. There was not a industry for rappers in this city, but there was an industry for DJs. There was an industry for records. There was an industry for retail. You know what I'm saying? So I thought, I'm gonna try and be a DJ and work in a record store, and then someday either own a DJ unit that does school dances, parties, wedding receptions, whatever, or be on the radio, even if that's possible, you know what I'm saying? Or own a record store. And then, like I said, I kind of just accidentally fell into rapping because I was in a group called Urban Atmosphere, and the rapper Spawn, I was his DJ. And one day he was just like, "Man, you rap, dude. Why don't you just rap on this song?" And I was like, "All right, cool." So I rapped on it, and then the two of us just never really kind of looked back. We just started making. I stopped being the DJ, and I
Uh-huh.
became the Fife Dog to his Q-Tip, you know what I'm saying? And then we became Atmosphere. And then we met Anthony, and Ant started making all the beats. And all of this was way back when we were still like, we were a 2-man group that had 3 whole songs to our name to show for 5 years of hanging out and smoking pot together. Okay. So it wasn't very serious still, because there was no industry for it. You didn't look at being a rapper as something that you could do for a long time. It's just something you do right now because you love being around it, you love the attention, and you still got to get home at a decent hour so you can wake up and go to work tomorrow morning. You know what I'm saying? Like, so yeah, long story short, you know, to get to where I am now from where I came from, it's a whole lot of luck and right place at the right time. And just, you know, I mean, following the rule of common sense, you know, common sense, and not being afraid of risk, I guess, but really mostly luck, man. Like I look at how I was able to find a position or a space in this compared to some of the rappers I knew growing up, and even still some of the rappers in my city who are phenomenal, amazing rappers, better than me. You know, I know that for me, it must have been a right place, right time situation in order for me to have figured out how to even, you know, break into the next city over.
Were you guys like, I mean, saying that at the time you said there really wasn't a whole, you know, scene there for it, were to play out or to kind of build a little fan base to, you know, to where you are now? Obviously, was that like convincing clubs to let you guys do shows there, or was there a little bit of a scene where you could book something like on a weeknight or weekend?
So what had happened was in the early 90s, a couple of infamous concerts happened here in town where big fights broke out, and it scared the music industry here, because we've always had a super strong music industry.
Oh yeah, so many big bands and artists have came out of it, obviously.
And so rap, you know, for lack of a better colloquialism, went underground. It already super was, but it went even further underground. It went into the hands of independent promoters and just artists who were like, well, I'm going to throw a party, and at the end of the night, I'm going to rap at my own party type shit. And so we had a scene, but just not an industry. There was a scene of people, because there's always been, I mean, the love for hip hop was strong here, similar to how it was in Europe or is in Europe, where it's almost like, since we have no birthright to it, since this is not the Bronx or even Brooklyn, since this is not Los Angeles, this is not, you know, when we found it, we loved it even harder, almost like nerds. We loved it harder than the people who felt a birthright to it, because to them, it was just every day. You know, I grew up across the hall from Nas. That's like, that would never happen here. You know what I'm saying? Like, that would never happen here. So there's a different kind of reverence for it that I saw, especially when I started traveling and seeing other towns like Minneapolis, and saw the reverence for this music and culture compared to New York. And it's not that the people in New York didn't love it, but also it was easy for them. It was natural for them. Here, we all worked really hard to be the best of the best, etc. So there was a scene, and it was a strong scene, and it was a scene of rappers that would battle each other, and a scene of DJs that would battle each other, but there was no industry. There was not ways for people to make music and sell it. You did have some groups who on the forefront, you know, groups like the Micronauts, IRM, to be specific, who were putting out tapes and records to a population of people who would buy it, but it wasn't enough to create an industry, you know? And a lot of it too, you know, there was a lot of competition, because everybody wanted to be the king of the hill. Everybody wanted to be the first one to put Minneapolis on the map. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like all of this that you would expect in a town the size of this, you know? And so when I, you know, kind of look back on that, like there was a groundwork, there was a foundation that was built there for us to all kind of use to inspire us, but it wasn't a mentorship style thing. It was still, we were still trying to gather all the information we could from watching music videos or reading articles in magazines about how a large professor makes beats, or about how, you know what I mean? It's like there was still a lot of that. And just also, you just kind of make it and go as you learn, which I do think is how Minneapolis got its sound for hip hop. When you look at some of the groups that people outside of Minneapolis are familiar with, you can see certain themes and sounds in their music that I think is you can see it in the rock from here too, and you can also see it in things like Prince, like Replacements, Husker Du. All of these bands were versions of their favorite bands, and the sound that Minneapolis owns is one of, hey, we don't really know what we're doing, but we're gonna make our version of what's happening out there in the rest of the world. I like to categorize it as a garage sound, but it's not basement thing, because our garages are too cold half the year for you to sit in there with your guitar playing buddies and make music. Everybody had to do it in the basement, which means they had to be a little quieter because mom is upstairs.
Sure.
And so now you're learning how to rock out at a minimal decibel level, and that is part of what created our like kind of thinner Minnesota sound that you heard inside of a lot of Minnesota music. This is way weirder and deeper than I was intending to go with you, so I apologize, and thank you very much for allowing me to take you on this journey through Minnesota music history as seen through the eyes of an old bitter rapper.
No, I appreciate it. I just thank you. This is what I love about this podcast, is hearing these type of stories. I don't want to keep you too long, though. I don't know if you have like a time crunch, so that's my only thing. But no, I'm just like, so once it comes, I mean, you've been independent this whole time, I mean, so to speak, with starting Rhymesayers and doing this all really like on it sounds like more of like a DIY basis, right? I mean, you guys had to forge the scene in Minneapolis, and then like, how do you get out of Minneapolis, obviously, and tour and have success with, and from Lucy Ford on, even the first record was a big record, but I feel like once that album came out, I'm sure that was a little bit, did that kind of change stuff for you when you did those 2 EPs?
It didn't. What happened at that point was everything started to blur. The blur before the storm occurred, where I was like, well, there's something here. I can feel it. I don't know where it's going to go, but I'll lean into it a little bit heavier. Like the actual real, like I quit my job and got my self-employed for life tattoo across my chest when we released God Loves Ugly. That was when suddenly I was like, okay, I don't have to have another person tell me what to do anymore. Which is also when things got scary, because, when you have a boss telling you what to do, you can always, at the very least, depend on just doing what you're being told to do to get you through. When suddenly my own decision making and my own control freak nature was at the forefront of my life, steering it, that's when things, that's when the anxiety really turned up. But also that's when the world was my oyster, so to say. That's when the sky had no limits. That's when, and so that was like kind of like the beginning of my big eyes and my even like that was when I was like, oh, I'm going to learn as much as possible. I'm going to take in as much as possible. And that's when the focus started to shift from just having fun to being like, oh, what should my agenda truly be here? I want to have fun. I'd also like to pay my bills. I also want to like make sure to develop situations that can help some of my other friends in Minneapolis figure out how to also get to this space. You know what I mean? It's like, but that was it. Overcast was interesting because people heard of us and we were getting write-ups in magazines and all kinds of things were happening, but you didn't really get to see any of the fruits of that. Nothing, it didn't translate to anything other than filling up these cardboard boxes of magazines that wrote about us. You know what I'm saying? It was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm collecting, you know what I mean? It was like, so at the time, everything was still kind of scary because I was a young father and I didn't, I had no college education, and I was like, well, what am I going to do? I got to figure out how to get some health insurance to be a real human being for my kid. You know what I'm saying? Like, life was still kind of freaky, man. I guess what I'm realizing and saying all this is life stayed scary. It's just the fear or the monster shifted. The monster would evolve. Next, I have no idea if that answers. I apologize.
No, that's it totally did. Well, like, I mean, when God Loves Ugly came out, that's the first time I saw you. That's when I got hip to Atmosphere, and I love that album. And I went back and bought the Lucy Ford when you guys had put it out on a like the two EPs together on an LP. And I remember seeing you at this venue in San Diego that doesn't even exist anymore. It's called The Scene.
I know the
And
scene. That was the all age spot, the big like little warehouse area,
yeah, it was like in a strip mall kind of.
yeah. All the good San Diego venues and strip malls. That's funny. Anyway.
Yeah, I remember seeing you guys there, and Ant threw on like a Hate Breed song just in the middle of the set, and I was like, it was crazy. I don't know if you even remember doing
That was
those things.
that was actually Mr. Dibbs that put the Hate
Oh,
Breed
that was
song
Mr.
on.
Dibbs did it.
Yeah,
Okay.
which totally makes sense because he's Mr. Dibbs. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, yeah. I would be very surprised if Ant ever threw a Hate Breed song on. That would be scary. That would be my new
Okay,
monster.
maybe it was Dibbs then. It was one, yeah,
It was,
somebody did, and I was like, damn, like this is insane. Oh. Well, yeah. So then putting out Seven's Travels and having like the MTVs and all these things happening too, that must have also caused you like anxiety, right? It's like, okay, now we're at this next level. What, how does that fall into
when all that was happening, I was kind of in my lane, so to speak, because I
Mhm.
had committed to figuring that out, how to crack that code, solve that puzzle. And I don't know that I ever did. I don't know that we got the chance to because things continued to still evolve. But that was when I think when I was running around with Dibs and all of these things were happening, like I'd said, when things started to pop off, I leaned into it. I was like, okay, I want to figure out what this is. It was almost like that was my education time. That was my
Mhm.
college. You know what I'm saying? Even though I was in my 30s at that point. I was 30 when God Loves Ugly came out. But that was when I was really taking on the information. I was learning things about publicity. I was learning things about radio and how radio actually worked, not just the things that us rappers used to tell each other about the conspiracies of who's holding us down. You know what I'm saying? How the industry is, whatever. So it's interesting because prior to that, you could even see in my material, I was very like, anti-record labels and all of
Yeah.
this, all of the regular stuff that rappers were supposed to be when we were, insecure. And when I hit that phase is when I started to open up and just become, I don't want to say more worldly, but I was traveling the world and I was able to like get more perspective.
Mhm.
And I think that, like I said, that was when I was really in my lane. I was really like gathering info, but that was before I finally hit the space of like, okay, I've seen a lot of the world and I want nothing to do with it. You know what I mean? Like as you get older, you're like, nah, I kind of just want a yard and some kids. And but at that time, like that's when I was a mover and a shaker, and I was really happy to be that because I was a late bloomer. Like I said, I was 30 when God Loves Ugly happened. And so this was my one chance to like have the childhood I didn't get to have. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And not only that, but also to learn a lot in the process, to really make sure to meet people and ask questions and travel a lot and try new foods. Cause up to that point, I was a very picky eater because I was scared of food. And then that was around the time with all the traveling and meeting people, I was opened up to like a whole, like 15 new palettes of food, bro. It was a very interesting time for me coming from
Mhm.
South Minneapolis and knowing that I really had no business being there in the room. You know what I'm saying? The fact that there was a space for me at the table it blew me away because I was sure that I somehow snuck in. You know what I mean? Like that this was not supposed to be happening.
Yeah, but you had a unique, I mean, you have a unique, uh, like lyrical approach, I feel like too. It's just so relatable on so many levels to even such a broad spectrum. And I feel like, I mean, we were playing you on alternative radio in San Diego. Like, it would be like a Green Day song into, trying to find a balance. It just like you were in this, you kind of just the sound kind of worked in such a bigger spectrum. And I feel like you see that more nowadays with artists, but at the time it was really cool to see, hip hop artists being, on the same playlist on the radio as, a punk
You
rock
know,
band.
I have theories of that as well, though, because I feel like, again, some right place, right timeness, but we were getting courted by pretty much every label. I had meetings with everybody, all the super famous label executives and all of the, I got to meet them all and talk to them.
Mhm.
And I also had the opportunity to decline
That's
everything that they
awesome.
all offered. Um, and then Epitaph was like, well, we're here for you if you want to do something interesting.
Mhm.
And they knew I didn't want to sign a deal. And so they were like, well, what about just letting us, you know, license your next album? And it was like, okay, and if that happens, what does it look like? You know, and once looking at all of the numbers and the ownership, and then also looking at what they were putting on the table, it made the most sense to us. They didn't, they were like, hey, we'll do distro, literally just a license agreement distro for Sevens Travels. And in return, and here's what you'll get percentage wise. And it wasn't a crazy bad number.
Mhm.
And they're like, and then we'll also get you on Warp Tour. And I was like, yo, you can get us on Warp Tour? And they're like, yeah, you know, we have some pull because they usually book a lot of our bands. And so we could probably sneak you guys onto one of the smaller stages. And it
Mhm.
was like, all right, that was kind of the thing that made me go, if I can get in front of those people and do what I do, I think that I could probably fish for some of these fans. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, let's do this. And I do think that hand in hand between our name getting thrown into the Warp Tour mix and our name being thrown on the Epitaph roster for a year got us onto alternative radio, alternative rock stations. We were played on K-Rock in LA, and it was
Mhm.
trying to find a balance. Now, had we not done that with Epitaph, there's no way that song would have found its way to alternative rock radio. It would have lived in Fat Beats, just like all of our other records did. And it would have been too alternative for a lot of the backpacker rap fans to even fuck with, because we were incorporating rock and we were slowing the beats down already before that was becoming like a trend. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Mhm.
and so a lot of that sound that we were fucking with was being informed by my traveling and meeting people and going to see hardcore shows or going to see, I mean, just being around other cultures outside of just the backpack culture that I was from. And so by incorporating that in the music and then being able to do Warp Tour, I think that's kind of how that it all just kind of worked together. And that's what broke our record on radio. That's what broke our record on MTV, you know. And it was a huge plus for us. I will always be grateful to Epitaph for that, because they were so dope about the whole process. You know what I'm saying? It's like, for somebody who was coming from a, F the major labels kind of mind state, to go to them, they're an indie label, but they're big enough and they operate like a smaller version of a major. You know what I'm saying? And so it
Yeah.
was like, it was a good learning experience without me having to actually give over or give up my rights to any of my music, or feel used, or any of the stuff that hip hop had trained me to be skeptical of. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, just because they are an indie label, but and they're run by Bad Religion and just like that whole like punk rock roots, but they're
Yep.
also they have such big bands that they have kind of become this
Well,
major, so to speak. Yeah, major distribution.
ultimately that's kind of what an indie label wants. They want to be able to walk into a bank and go, I need a loan for this much fucking money,
Yeah.
without the bank laughing at them. So when you're an indie label that gets to that point, then that means you have the resources to break artists that you believe in that might be too risky, but too risky for a WIA, or too risky for a Universal. But you can do it because not only are you big enough and have the resources to break them, but you have the the background. There are people who are fans of the label. You know
Right,
what I'm
right.
saying? And that's a thing. That there's nobody that's just like, I'm a fan of Sony. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but there were people specifically at that time who were like, yo, I'm rocking a shirt that says Epitaph.
Mhm.
Literally, you know what I mean? Like, and that's not something. So they were an indie that got to that had access to the resources that a major might. And not really, obviously, majors own like, housing developments and shit. Like majors are huge, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
but just as far as indies go, Epitaph was like massive, you know what I mean? And then just their relationship to the whole Vans and Warped Tour scene at that time, like that was a machine. That was a machine that basically was able to sell a band like me to kids that were like supposed to be listening to Coheed and Cambria. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Yeah.
and it's crazy because we would see the crossover then between Coheed and like we had no idea that that would actually be a thing, but it was a beautiful thing. You know what I'm saying? It was like
Mhm.
it was pretty cool to see that, and it was pretty cool for bands on Warped Tour to be able to get along with each other based on the fact that they shared an audience. People who might not ever have even looked twice at each other on the street, but because we share an audience, we have this bond that we can sit and shoot the shit and talk about and realize, oh, we actually have a lot more in common than we thought, even though we came from these differently or more diverse spaces than each other. I don't, all that just to say, like, again, I was super fortunate and lucky in how a lot of this played out because it didn't have to.
Mhm.
I know that. I know that this didn't go this way because of how much I deserved it. It went this way because I was like, whoa, I was at the right place at the right time, and I was allowed to be myself. That's the other thing about a lot of this, man, is like I look back on a lot of it and go, wow, that I never really had to like pretend to be or pretend to be angry or pretend to be smart or pretend to be, I could be the same not well enough read human being that I really am. I can be full of dad jokes. I could be whatever the hell I want to be, and I was still being accepted by my audience, and
Mhm.
that was even early on, like people talk about God Loves Ugly and Lucy Ford, and I'm like, man, it's crazy when I look at that because I was cracking dad jokes on those records. You listen to a record like Guns and Cigarettes on the Lucy Ford album, and it's like full of really corny jokes, but somehow I was able to sell those jokes to people. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's
Yeah.
pretty interesting to see how I've still managed to just kind of hold my space as the true dipshit that I really am, and but and be okay that way. And it's like people allow me to, they accept me.
Well, you're authentic as hell, and you're also not only authentic but vulnerable with your lyrics and what you speak of and the stories that you tell. I think that's what draws people in as well.
Well, it's funny because, and I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you. And I don't know what it means though, because I feel like there's nothing that I'm doing that everybody couldn't do. When we write songs, we don't write them in front of people.
Mhm.
You're by yourself. You're writing these words and you're by yourself, or maybe you're next to the person who you're co-creating this with, right? And so how could you not be authentic? You're alone. You have this opportunity to be vulnerable because you're by your fucking self. I'm sorry for cursing. I don't know if I'm
Oh no,
allowed to
you're
do.
allowed to cuss. Yeah,
Oh,
no,
okay,
go
okay.
for
Oh, then it's
it.
crazy because you have no idea. I've been so careful this whole time.
No, dude, you can
Okay,
cuss.
so okay. But you're alone. So why not write what you would write to yourself? Why not write what you would write while alone? And then you still have time to edit it before another person has to hear it. But for at least that moment, figure out what you're trying to say in that space. Then process it and work through it and make it the song that you're going to show the people, if that's the case.
Mhm.
And sometimes you'll find that you don't have to edit nothing. You can literally marry these words to this music and create this moment. And I think that, I feel like any of us could do that. I feel like the only ones of us who can't do that are the ones that somehow bought our spot. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but I feel like if you have made it into a space where people want to hear what you got to say, then you gotta stick to saying the things that you've got to say. You shouldn't be going outside of that. It's
Mhm.
funny because I mean, obviously I've been doing this for a long time, so I've met a lot of artists who don't abide by that, who do, have careers figuring out how to make something that somebody wants to hear. And I have a respect for that because I don't know how to fucking do that. I don't know how to go, what would sound good know. I hear music and I will like a song based on some of the weirdest shit and not even understand myself why I like this song sometimes, you know? And so with that said, how am I supposed to like be able to fortune tell what somebody else is going to want to hear, you know? And,
Mhm.
and so, you know, especially in this kind of music in within hip hop, there's a lot of, it's very sound based, you know. If you don't have a good voice, rest in peace Guru, he said that, you know, it's all the voice. If you don't have a good voice, then just go write a book, you know what I'm saying? And so when it's, you know, in rock, you can have a horrible voice and get over it. You just have to really learn how to use that horrible voice. Bob Dylan has got like, I cannot stand this guy's voice. He's from Minnesota, so it's fair for me to use him as an example.
I thought he was from New York. That's
No,
awesome.
he's from Minnesota, and but I can't stand his voice, but I love his records because
Right.
he takes this voice that, you know, it's like, but in hip hop, there's really not a lot of opportunity to do that. I might have one of the worst voices in hip hop, you know what I'm saying?
Eh.
And so, you know, I'm from Minnesota. It's okay. I'm allowed to say that. And so within that, you know, it's like, it's an interesting approach. Sound is a huge room that you can go into and make really great music,
Mhm.
without your words mattering, you know what I'm saying? And I respect that because I don't know how to do that. That might be the code I need to figure out and crack next, you know what I'm saying? That's kind of what a lot of this has come down to nowadays. When we make music, you know, your competition is yourself, and that can mean anything to anybody. But to me, what it means is that now I put rules and restrictions and ceilings and obstacles in place that I got to figure out how to maneuver while I'm writing my songs and while I'm trying to marry these words to Anthony's music.
Mhm.
And with that said, that's our version now of competing with ourselves or trying to outdo ourselves. And I don't know if that'll ever translate in the actual records, but I know that it's the thing that keeps this really fun for me. It's the thing that keeps me making music at the rate that I'm making it. You know what I'm saying? It's like I'm still writing and recording every week. I don't stop unless I have to like take the family somewhere for their family vacation, whatever. Or, you know,
Oh.
drive all the kids up north to the lake and so go see their grandma. Um, then I got to take a break. But otherwise, you know, Monday through Friday, I'm trying to get over to the studio to write songs. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, uh, but that's just it. Now it's like trying to outdo the song you wrote before. You
Mhm.
can't outdo who you were before. You can grow, you can become a better person, but that doesn't necessarily translate in art all the time. Um, and so you don't want to compete with who you are as a human or who you were, not, you know, not artistically. You want to stay true to who you are today. You shouldn't be the same person today that you were 20 years ago. If evolved for better or worse in 20 years, I don't know what to say. That's weird.
Mhm.
Should continue to, or your paintings should continue to challenge your last painting. I don't know if as a cartoonist I would be like, oh, I got to figure out how to beat this cartoonist. I would probably be working on how to beat my other cartoons because that's how I see music. I don't know if any of that makes sense, and I'm kind of
No.
rambling at this
N
point. So
No, totally.
that means the
I mean,
caffeine is starting to wear off.
well, I mean, like, okay, so 25 years later or maybe even a little bit longer of Atmosphere, you're still putting out records that are amazing. And are you doing, I mean, you go to the studio 5 days a week. Is this any different? Like when you like this new album, for example, going into this new album, do you approach it any different every time you go into the studio? Or is it just kind of like, let's just keep doing, we do what we
Well,
do.
we approach it different every time we start a new project, and
Okay.
then we stick to the rules. It's funny, we have a little meeting, we say a bunch of jokes, we come up with the plan, and the plan can be as simple as, hey, every single record on this album has to have a triangle in it, or every single record on on this album, you know, or we're going to take all of the songs and put them in order so that the first letter spells something. Okay, now for you, we're going to make sure that everything you do has a certain type of spaciousness, or a certain, okay, all, or you know. And so it's like Ant comes up with his challenges, I come up with mine. My writing challenges will be, you know, like the one I'm working on currently. I mean, I don't want to talk about it because it's not done, but you know, the last one I worked on, the challenge was to translate my music into electro. I don't know if you're familiar with electro music and what it sounds like, but I'm trying to translate the type of songs I write into electro beats. And so
Okay. I'll
the
have to
whole
check it out.
project, well,
This new
it'll be
one.
out. Well, no, that one will come out in like later. It's the one we just turned in, so it's probably a little ways out. I'm not
Okay.
supposed to talk about that. Okay, so I'm supposed to talk about this most recent one. So the
So
one
many
that,
other realities exist simultaneously. Is the one that
yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah.
waiting
So
on.
that particular, you know, our joint challenge on that record, but also our solo, our independent challenges on this new album that comes out May 5th. So many other realities exist simultaneously. The challenge of that was we wrote the whole thing in sequence. And so he would give me the first beat and go, here's a beat. This is what I think we should start the album with. I like this. Let's go. I take that, I make a song to it, and then I bring it back. And if he goes, I like the song, this is a song, here's the next beat. And then that way,
Oh.
my challenge was to write the story in a sequence. Now, I don't want to make a whole album that's one long story, because I feel like that's like
Yeah, it's not a
super
concept
pretentious.
album.
But it is, though. It ended up being a concept album, but just not something that's, it's not like you could play it while watching Wizard of Oz on mute.
Okay.
It's not that kind of a thing.
Gotcha.
But there is a story here about departure. There's a, I don't want to say a main character, but there's a concept of a spirit or a person, and it's about that particular character's movement through Earth, departure from Earth, and kind of like eulogy, or like self-eulogy. And so there's, I don't want to say a death, because the character doesn't really die, but also, but he does, but they don't. I don't know how to, who cares about all that? The important part is the sequencing. So he would give me a piece and I would make a song to it, and then give it back to him, and then he would add to it and then give it back to me. And then once that song felt done, we set it here, and it's like, okay, there's track one, track two. What was cool about doing it this way is it allowed me to actually pay attention to the song lengths, because I wanted to make sure to fit this onto vinyl in the way that I wanted it to fit. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
I was able to really approach the whole project with a final destination already in mind.
Mhm.
In many ways, I didn't know where it was going to go or what color paint he was going to give me to use, but I knew that when it was over with, I wanted to see a particular picture. And so in the process of all of that, I found myself really leaning into metaphors for creating art. A lot of the titles, a lot of the referencing I do reference the different things I was kind of forcing myself to look at and experience to give me inspiration for what I was going to write about. Add all the, you know, this was our COVID album, basically. We were making this during lockdown. We
Oh, okay.
also had, you know, the police murdered George Floyd here, just not that far from where we're sitting in the car right now. And we had an uprising here, and there was just a lot going on in the city. Even, you know, the city itself, the actual art scene had its own little uprising going on, and there was call outs, and there was like all of this stuff happening all at one time. All of, you know, this album was made during that experience. And so being able to write this album in sequence and to make it about the arc of life, while also kind of like being like, what the hell is going on? Like,
Mhm.
I don't, you know what I mean? Like, it was a very fun album to make. Fun is a weird word to use when I mention all of the different things that were happening, because obviously lockdown wasn't fun and whatnot. But what I'm saying is, like, this was a great way for me to not go crazy. And I put all that into this album, you know what I mean? And so it was kind of like, kind of a, I don't want to say, because all the time people will say that I use these albums as ways for me to like vent my frustrations or to write about whatever, you know what I mean? But this is like an actual one where this was what's the word that I'm looking for? I suck when it comes to words. It's I can't remember. It's not. I can't remember the word, but a way to be therapeutic with my with what I'm thinking about, what I'm stressed about,
Mhm.
and there was just more stresses than just the regular stresses of just life and being irritated by your surroundings or irritated by what's happening on a social level or being mad at the police because they're bitches. You know, there was all these extra things too, you know, that also helped inform where this record went. So adding that to like I was saying before, the sequencing of the album allowed me to really kind of like have a good picture of what I wanted to paint and how I wanted to get there. And I still had to wait for him to give me the tools to use to paint the
Mhm.
canvases, if you will. And I think that, you know, it made for a very interesting time for him and I. You know, it's just our relationship, friends. We've been doing this together for a really long time. And to see that every time we come together to start a project, we still have these silly ideas of like, well, how could we make this, you know, interesting to us? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because none of this shit translates to the listener ever. You know what I mean? And but that's not the point. The point is like, how do we make some shit that if I ever am forced to go back and listen to this album, I'm gonna hear all these Easter eggs in there and all of these things that are like, you know, about him and I and our friendship and our relationship. You know what I'm saying? And this album had it was a really great version of that. He said something recently that I liked. He said he called this album a masterpiece, right? And it's not like we really talk like that, but
Right.
he said that, and then he said, and the reason I say that is because I did my best to do everything to my fullest capabilities, and what I ended up with was a portrait of what my masterpiece, what my potential is. This is what my potential is. I feel like I was able to really like fulfill a lot of that here. Now I just have to figure out how to convince other people that that's what this is. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And I was just like, wow, like that's kind of in weirdly kind of what it is, because at the end of the day, you know, especially for us, I mean, you know, a lot of our relationship to our audience is like you find yourself listening to people talk to you about your songs, and when they tell you their interpretation of them, man, there's plenty of times where I'm listening thinking, wow, your interpretation of my song is way cooler than what my song means to me, so let's run with your interpretation. You know what I'm saying? And so but the truth is, like, I have my interpretation of all this, and the way Ant articulated that, it really struck me as a like, whoa, what a great succinct way to put that, because I've never known how to like actually articulate that feeling of like, oh, this is an amazing album. Nobody else might not know, but because the reason it's amazing isn't maybe even available for people to see. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's more like, oh, it's amazing because of all these little idiosyncrasies that are inside of here that don't translate orally. They're only in here because they were actually part of my physical experience with the process. You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, yeah, without telling me that, no one would know that you know, that's the way the record was created, right? I mean, or how the
Sure,
album was
sure.
created, like to be able to put those kind. I love how you guys do those kind of creative. It's almost like a creative exercise on each album. Like, okay, I'm gonna hand you all of these, you know, one track at a time, and then we'll create the songs that way. And you're already thinking, okay, the vinyl's gonna look like this, and needs to have this many songs on one side, and then you kind of have to get even more creative in a sense of building it the way that you want it to look like at the end.
You know, even the art, there was a guy I was following on Instagram, an artist named Michael Allen Alien, and I reached out to him, was just like, hey, I really like what you're doing, and I have this idea that I just started working on. And this was back in, you know, mid 2020. I
Mhm.
reached out to him and was just like, I want to make this project that is a moving piece, and I think I need some of your art to help. And I want to start giving you bits and pieces of what's going into this project. I don't want to, it was too early to just start sending songs out over the internet to people that I barely knew, right? So I was like
Right, yeah.
I was sending lines from the song and just things to help inform him of kind of the things I was talking about. And then he created an art piece based on his interpretation of what it was. And it's now when I look at his art, I'm just like, wow, like it's like so much of the album is wrapped up inside of that art. I can see it. The way he works too is I'm not really sure what to call it, but it's very fine, and it's like there's drawings inside of drawings and all, you know what I mean? And so it's like there's this, the art itself is, you know, I interpreted it as a portrait of Anthony and myself, which is great because I hate when they put us on the cover of the album. But in this respect, this is a really cool way to put us on the cover of the album.
Yeah, it's a great drawing. I've seen the cover. Yeah, it's really cool.
Right on. I appreciate that. So yeah, from start to finish, this was kind of like an art fuck project for me and Ant, because it's what, you know, it's just kind of what happened, especially during the era or the time that we were working on this was like, you know, nobody was going out. I wasn't going to restaurants. I wasn't, you know, I was going to the park because it was outdoors and I could take the kids, you know what I'm saying? But it was like, otherwise it was just consumption, consuming shows and Netflixes and consuming, you know, articles and consuming and screens and consuming and looking at art, you know what I'm saying? Looking at everybody, listening. I listened to more music during that time than I probably had listened to since I was like 17 or 18 years old, you know? And so it was just like all this consumption and then taking everything I was consuming and trying to repurpose these thoughts, repurpose the anger in the city that was happening with the George Floyd shit, repurpose all of the divisiveness that was going on, what COVID did to everybody, you know what I mean? It's just like, you know, there was an argument that I had with a neighbor. It's so insane. There was one moment where a neighbor was yelling at a friend of mine, and I came outside to be like, hey, that's my friend. He's okay. What he's doing is okay. And then the neighbor looked at me like he didn't know who I was. And it was just the world was kind of losing its shit. And I was like, yes, give me all of it because I'm gonna write about it. You know what I mean? Like, and yeah. So I'm pretty excited about this one. But dude, you could talk to me before any album and I'm gonna be pretty excited about it because that's just how it works. And then the day it comes out is the day that I'll be like, yep, I'll never hear that album again. You know what I'm saying? It's like
you're just already looking at the next one.
I'm already looking at the next one. You know what I mean? It's like, but yeah, like I'm definitely pretty excited about this. I'm excited for people to hear it, you know.
The songs I've heard off the album so far are awesome. I love the video. I was gonna, you know, quickly just touch on the fact that you know, it has a kind of that alien concept to it. Was that part of the, like, pulling from that artist? You said that he had some alien-ish. I think that's what you said about the artist.
Oh, his name is Michael Allen Alien.
Oh, that's what it was.
Yeah, the alien thing was last summer, man. We were in a van being picked up in Boston and driven out to some place out in Massachusetts for a festival, and it was like an hour drive. And while we were driving through, you'd see forest and then all of a sudden a bridge with graffiti, and it was just like the juxtaposition of being in nature and still being able to see graffiti, which I'm very sensitive to graffiti. It's a part of my childhood, you know what I mean? And so it's like, and so sitting there and listening to Anthony talk in the back seat, and the driver who was driving us, a young man, super cool dude, great driver. And anyway, I was like, yo, I got an idea for a video. And everybody got quiet. And I was like, how about this? And it was based on, do you remember Alf?
Oh, yeah.
Remember how Alf always wanted to eat the family cat?
Yeah, I forgot about that.
And so I was just like, yo, what if we take the concept of Alf, but apply it to all this shit that everybody's arguing about right now? You know what I'm saying? And so it's kind of like, so there's, you know, the interspecies marriage between human and alien is being suggested, but obviously that's just about people arguing about who gets to marry who or who gets to do what. You know what I'm saying? It's like we were just kind of like going, hey, what if with everything that's going on around us right now, we also added to the mix that there were plausibly, you know, aliens here walking among us, you know? And everybody laughed. And that's usually a sign to me that I need to push the idea even further. And so then I spoke with the guy, Justin Marmo, who made the video, and was like, what about this? And we took the idea and chopped it up and kind of brainstormed and made a video out of it. You know, it's weird because when you're in the space I'm in, it's kind of like we're popular enough that we get a shot to have our shit get seen and heard, but we're not so popular that a video could make or break us. You know what I'm saying? It's like so we have this freedom to really just do any dumb shit that we think of. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
and not only that, but it's like, it's these are our resources. We spend our own resources to make these videos. We do what we want to do. Like that's a freedom and a privilege that comes with being in this like weird blue collar middle ground of this industry. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like that's another thing that I'm grateful for. Pretty lucky that I'm allowed to be like, hey, I got an idea for a video, and then a few months later see it actually materialize.
That's so it's such a cool video. I love it. Like Murs is in it. You like kick him some change, and like when you're walking out of the store, like and I love what you did with Felt. That group was so good. I saw you guys play at like Rock the Bells in San Bernardino or something years upon years ago.
That makes sense. Yeah, I was there. I remember that.
Yeah. But yeah, I can't wait to hear the rest of the record. I've got, I've heard like 4 or 5 songs, I think 5 songs. You just put another single out recently. But I can't wait
Yep.
to hear the rest of the album. And you're doing a huge tour that's killer coming up with, I think Slightly Stoopid, right? And some other
Yeah, Slightly Stoopid and Sublime with
Oh, yeah, Sublime
Rome
with Rome. Yeah.
and The Movement and Us. And are you still in San Diego?
I'm not. You guys are playing Petco Park. I moved to Tennessee like a year and a half ago.
Woo,
So
Tennessee's hot right now, bro.
oh yeah. It was
You
brutal,
okay?
man. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's different. Definitely. I mean, I spent my whole life in California.
Sure.
Well, this
But
has been
there's
an
a
interesting
no,
move.
and I don't mean hot temperature wise. I mean just there's a lot going on right now for you guys.
Oh
Like
yeah.
it's a heavy space right now. So
Well, hot temperature wise too. It's like in the 80s today. But yeah,
oh, that's
I
beautiful
didn't
because
even
it's 30 here right now, bro.
oh
Like
man.
there's
I didn't even think to reference the political aspect that's going on here. Yeah, it's been a wild month for sure. But yeah, I saw you guys aren't coming through here. I was trying to figure out the closest date I could get to.
oh man, yeah, and you guys just had a tragedy there too. Like
Yeah.
Tennessee's going through it, man. Like I hope the best for you guys. I hope everybody gets through all this without too much infighting, man. Like it's crazy to watch the world pick sides as
Mm.
if there's just two sides. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's weird how it's like you either agree with me on everything or fuck you. And
Right. Exactly.
it's weird because I'm old, and so I can remember when if you and me agreed on 3 things and disagreed on 3 things, we could still show up at the protest and get along because we agreed on the thing that we're protesting about today. You know what I'm saying?
Correct.
But
Yeah,
now
yeah,
it's
yeah.
kind of like you're either this or you're this, and there's no more room for nuance or just uh, even understanding why the other person might think the way they think. It's a weird thing, but yeah, you guys are kind of the heart right now of that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
It's
I
been
hope the
it's
best.
thank you, man. Yeah, we're a little south of Nashville and more of the suburbs, but yeah, it's been definitely an interesting time. Definitely it was quite a change when we moved from San Diego to here for sure, but we love it.
Yeah,
It's good for our family. But dude, thank you so much, Slug, for doing this today, man. Like honestly, you are so awesome. I appreciate you doing this. Like I said, you were like one of the first people I ever interviewed when I was just getting into radio in like 2008, and I thank you so much for your time today, man.
I appreciate you back, man. Take care of yourself. I should go. I just realized I'm
Yeah.
5 minutes late for the
Oh,
next one.
well,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
Do you
that's
have one
not.
second I just my last question is just if you have any advice to aspiring artists. I don't know if you have one sentence.
I mean, advice is weird because that would signify that I know what I'm doing or that I did it right. What I would say to young artists that are trying to get in is, one, just remember, if you just keep going and you just stick to you and doing what you're gonna do, it's gonna work. Now, that doesn't mean you're gonna get rich or anything, but what it means is that it's going to resonate with people because at some point, all of us just want somebody who's not going to lie to us. That's it. We just want somebody who's going to tell us the truth, something we can believe in, give us something to hope for. And so that doesn't mean you have to write about that or paint about that. But what it means is if you just stick to who you are and what you do and being genuine and honest with all that, that's gonna land with people. You're gonna find your audience, you know. I think that's the main thing and I've said that before. Some people who hear this might have heard me say that before, but that's the thing that I try to always tell younger cats is like, just don't lie. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to your audience. Don't lie. Don't lie to your mom.